This is my friend Yona Roseman.
Why should people refuse to serve in the Israeli army?
Because there's a genocide and you don't enlist into an army that's committing a genocide.
She's a 19-year-old citizen of Israel who is refusing mandatory military conscription on the grounds that the state of Israel is committing crimes against humanity, including genocide in Palestine. In a few days from this video's release, Yona will be sent to military jail for refusing military service. There are only a couple hundred other refusers like Yona, so most of her fellow activists are widely harassed by Zionists and isolated from Israeli society. Without further ado, Yona Roseman. All right, I'm joined by Yona Roseman, an IDF refuser and an incredible activist, brave, incredible, wonderful activist from Israel, from Haifa. And today we're going to be asking some questions to Yona about what it's like living in the belly of the beast as an IDF refuser. Yona, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Yona. I'm 19. I'm originally from the north, but I live in Haifa currently, which most people would also call the north. And in 17 days, I'm going to show up at the draft office and declare my refusal. And for that, I'll likely be sent to military jail. Other than that, I'm an activist. I frequent anti-genocide, pro-Palestine protests, and I've also gotten arrested a handful of times.
What is like the exact day they're locking you up? Is it August 17th, August 16th?
Yeah. It's August 17th. Well, that's the day of my enlistment order. So I'll show up that day, and they sometimes decide to only like put you on trial a day later. So you spend a night in arrest and then only get sentenced. But around that time, yeah.
I see. How long do you think you'll have to serve prison time?
Well, the usual sentence for refusal is 30 days, but it's the maximum sentence. But it's not like once you complete that sentence, you don't get exempted. So they call you back in. And that can happen over and over and over until you get an exemption somehow, or the IDF relents. So since the beginning of the Gaza genocide, the longest someone has sat in military prison in cumulative sentences for refusing was 197 days. But there have also been people who have only served a month. So I don't know.
Ooh. Okay, I gotta ask you this because I feel like this is, at least before meeting you on Twitter almost a year ago now, I think my perception of those who refuse the IDF has been entirely guided by the very infamous tweet from the Taylor Swift Stan account on Twitter. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes, of course.
Do you know this person? Are they famous in Israel? Do people there hate this person?
So there's over the years there's been a lot of rumors in our groups on who that person is. Some people claimed to have known them, and as far as I know, we don't know who they are. I've seen enough articles with journalists who have shown like letters from them and talked to them to know pretty for certain that it is a real case. But it seems like they weren't involved, at least in the activist groups that I am familiar with, unfortunately.
That's really funny. I was always curious, like, is that like a real person? Is this like, initially I thought it was just a bit, but then they were really committed to it where they were like writing handwritten letters from prison or something. I was like, damn, they're really deep into this. But hey,
I think
respect.
I think for certain it was someone who did actually refuse the military service.
Yeah. Can you just briefly tell me a little bit about how, you're Israeli, I'm assuming you're Jewish. How did you grow up to be anti-Zionist and support the Palestinian cause?
I was raised in like left Zionist household. Like my parents support conscripting into the military and the existence of the state, but they, at least in theory, brought me up on values of like universalism and equality and that sort of stuff. And I think pretty naturally, just over time, being exposed to the reality of apartheid that existed before October 7th already led me to that sort of conclusion. From a pretty young age, I started being active in certain protest groups, and I always leaned into the more left-leaning blocs in those protests that were against the occupation or against apartheid. And it's through them that I met like actual anti-Zionist activists and Palestinian activists, and that expanded my worldview into like what is actually possible to like what views are actually possible to hold, and I fairly naturally came to that conclusion as the longer I was exposed to the atrocities that my country has been committing.
It's incredible. So you'd say it's mostly from the protests and the friends and comrades you made along the way. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, of course. Also, social media, like being able to not just be restricted to what we're taught in schools and what the media shows us, but being able to see a wider picture contributed to it. But I think it was more so, well, it was like I already had a certain like set of values that just naturally led me to that conclusion as I was being exposed to what was actually happening.
Thanks to some of the horrific images we've seen coming out of Gaza in the past week or so, we've seen calls from Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer to recognize a Palestinian state. There was even an article by Amit Segal, the right chief, or like the right-wing chief political correspondent for Israel's Channel 12, stating that there was a hunger crisis, which is a big change in the language that he uses, even though he's kind of come out against that recently, which is also insane in and of itself. And also like various neoliberals in between claiming that we have to do something now that we're starting to see all these starving children. But in many ways, it feels kind of like a generational turn of the tides. And of course, it's on the heels of nearly 2 years of genocide and a widespread man-made famine in Gaza. How does the vibe shift make you feel? And does it give you any hope in fighting what is otherwise an extremely uphill battle against this bloodthirsty state?
Like it's somewhat uplifting that people are waking up. Even within Israel, there's been certain news anchors and journalists and media people who have so far stayed silent and have finally like the horrific images that have been coming out in recent weeks like finally broke them into saying something. But it kind of feels like, at least within Israeli society, that I mean things are so horrific and have already been so horrific that it's kind of hard for me to imagine what any change like that. It's hard for me to imagine that there are people who have not yet come to this conclusion, who like to oppose the genocide or to refuse military service, etc., who will now come to this conclusion. um I think the fact that there is increasing international pressure is very good. I hope that the international movement continues to gain momentum, and that the pressure doesn't just end in symbolic and diplomatic gestures, but in economic sanctions and tougher tools.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I guess on that same note, like what is the end goal here? Like in your opinion, is your end goal to get Israelis to stop serving in the IDF, a ceasefire, a two-state solution, a one-state solution, something in between? What do you long for? What do you think the right end goal of this horrible mess that we found ourselves is?
Well, I think, ideally, and in what I would dream of, and also work to achieve is a one democratic state for everyone with right to return for all Palestinian refugees. I think that's the most just solution that is also possible in my eyes. But the situation for the last 2 years have been so depressing and so horrific that it's hard to keep that political imagination going. Like it's not that it doesn't concern me. It does, but all I can think about is just that there's a genocide and how we can end the genocide. Obviously, there's a lot of things that will need to be done, and I'll participate in after that point. But that's kind of where all my focus is.
I agree. I think that would be the ideal solution, and it feels so insurmountable. I feel like, as corny as it is, like meeting folks like yourself does give me very genuine hope, because I feel like at least the media that I consume, and I feel like a lot of the media we see here in the U.S. it really only represents the hardcore Zionist, oftentimes right wing, but even often central left wing movements that we've seen come out of Israel. And it feels like it is just hopeless. So I'm very grateful for folks like yourself who give us in the outside world an immense amount of hope that there is a better world possible, that there are people who are I don't know, morally committed to doing the right thing and genuinely like putting putting their money where their mouths are and actually doing the legwork to make it happen. One of those folks we've seen recently, I believe it was 3 or maybe 4 days ago now, Awdah Hathaleen, an Israeli settler, shot and killed one of these activists in the West Bank, Awdah, who was an instrumental part in filming the Oscar award-winning film No Other Land. Let me get your reaction, and more broadly, what is the reaction in Israel? Has it even been publicized? How are people feeling about his tragic passing? And rather, tragic murder, I should say.
Yeah. Well, I actually knew Awdah, not particularly close. I had a talk with him in the first time I was in Masafriata when I was 17. So his murder hit very harshly, at least for me, and in general, with the community and my friends. I have friends that were in Masafriata and just like hours before he was murdered, and that are there right now, and it's very much like it hit very close to home, and it's very just shocking. And with quote unquote settler violence, a lot of more center left figures have been very staunchly against it because they can rhetorically disconnect it from the actions of the army. And so there's been a lot of attention, even within Israel, at least a fair amount of attention into Awdah's murder and similar cases, at least in comparison to the carnage that goes on in Gaza. But it's a bit disingenuous. It isn't an isolated incident. This isn't just some outlaw who decided to murder Awdah. It's someone who has the full backing of the state, and even during and after the murder. And there are still 17 people from Awdah's village who were arrested by the orders of the murderer. And the state is continuing to hold his body hostage because they refuse to let the residents of Khair host a funeral in their in their home, in their village. So it's disingenuous. So there's been some attention to it, but I think it's not of much meaningfulness if they can't connect it to the wider conduct of the army and the state.
I have a tweet here on my screen from Andre, fellow activist like yourself, who, just as you said, mentions that Israel kidnapped 17 family members of Awdah and is refusing to return the body of Awdah's body to the family. The women of the village have gone on hunger strike until the body is returned. What's going on? Is this common where a settler receives the sort of like impunity granted by the state, and then the state acts on their behalf to kidnap their family members, the victims' family members, and then effectively torture them in some capacity, whether it's through holding their body, the victim's body, or is this standard procedure?
I mean, that's the reality of apartheid. It's that one people live under one legal system in which they have full rights and privileges and free hand in doing any sort of atrocity against another people who don't live under that reality. It's one system that's built to uphold the supremacy of one people over another. And even in times when the system tries to make a sort of vision of law and order and of fairness, it gets stopped by members in the government and in the army who are very much ideologically committed into keeping that reality at all costs. And yeah, I mean, since in the last 2 years, there have been dozens of Palestinians who have been murdered by settlers. And there have been almost 1,000 Palestinians murdered in the West Bank in general, most of them by the army. But, even in the cases of people acting outside of the law or against the law, barely, if any of them, have led to charges. Some Jews were placed under administrative arrest, similar to the thousands of Palestinians under administrative arrest, and even that was overruled by the new defense minister who freed all Jews from administrative arrests. And yeah, the fact that Awdah's murderer was released after a day while 17 members of his family are still under arrest very much showcases that reality.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe the murderer is sanctioned by multiple countries, including the United States. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure.
I think Trump cancelled the sanction on him.
Oh, man.
On all Jewish Israelis, it was sanctioned by Biden, yeah.
Is this person commonly known? Is this an infamous figure in activist circles, in Israeli settler circles, that people are either afraid of if you're an activist or Palestinian just trying to live their lives, or I guess a champion to other settlers, setting the tone of the level of violence they can commit against the people just trying to live their lives?
Yeah, he is. His name is Yinon Levi. He's from the outpost Chavat Mitarim farm. And he has been personally responsible for the ethnic cleansing of multiple communities in Masafariata. Yeah, he's well known. And this sort of conduct is not unusual either. A few months ago, there was another person from Masafariata who was shot, but thankfully survived. It's not ignorance that led to this murder happening. He's an agent of the state in all but name, and he's well known.
Yeah. God, when I saw videos of the aftermath where Yinon Levi was just standing next to IDF soldiers, not in handcuffs, but rather pointing it at villagers or family members of Awdah, and paramedics, if I'm not mistaken, too, saying, hey, arrest these people. It's such a shocking image because it's like, this dude just fucking killed someone. Like, what are we doing? Like, it from the outside world, it feels so shocking, but it also feels very, I don't know, it makes you numb in many ways. Living in Israel, seeing this all the time, I don't know if it's broadcast on all of the news networks, or I guess across social media. Do you find yourself feeling numb to this? Do you find yourself increasingly feeling a degree of apathy, or just like, what the hell's going on? Like, what's inside you? Like, is it anger? Is it passion? Like, what's going on?
No, I don't think numbness is the feeling. It's also just an endless chasm of depression, almost. Awdah isn't the first Palestinian I knew who was murdered by the state. It's awful. I don't have any words to describe it. It's enraging. And like with Gaza and seeing hundreds of people die every day, it feels like just there's nothing, like nothing is enough, and there's nothing that I can do. And yeah, when it's someone that you knew, it's so much scarier, and it hits a lot closer to home.
Yeah. When you were arrested, you said free Palestine, free Gaza, free all of the political prisoners, and free Raja Eghbaria.
Yeah.
Who is Raja Eghbaria? What does he mean to you? What does he mean to the liberation of Palestine more broadly?
Raja is a political leader from the 48 territories, specifically from the city of Fahm. He's been put under administrative arrest last April. He's one of thousands of Palestinians under administrative arrest. He's a 73-year-old man, and Israeli prisons have turned into essentially torture camps in which dozens have died over the last 2 years, maybe even over 100. We don't know the numbers because the law since has been more lenient on keeping registry of that sort of stuff. Raja already had health problems, and when he was being transferred from one prison to another, the prison guards dragged him down a stairway, which led to him breaking his leg. There aren't many Palestinians under administrative arrest in 48, and of those that there are, only Raja is publicly known due to the decision of the family members of the other prisoners. And I'm active in Fahm, in that city, so it also feels close. I probably have been to the same protests that he has been at, but I've never talked to him personally. But I wrote an article about him, and I talked with his wife, and I've been to, I think, half a dozen court cases and pretty much the same number of protests regarding him. So he's just one prisoner I decided to focus on. But yeah, all Palestinian prisoners, political prisoners, and are currently kept in torture camps. And I hope to see the release of all of them.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I don't even know if there are many, but what is your message to other Israelis who find themselves, who have, been questioning the worldview that's been sold to them over the past, I don't know, I mean, probably their entire lives, but have seen, the most televised genocide in history over the past nearly 2 years now, and are starting to question everything that they've been told? What's your message to them?
Well, I think it's in two parts. The first is that they're not alone. I think what helps me most in continuing to do this is the fact that I have community and that there is community, and that is both international but also does exist within Palestine as well. And it's important to find it, and it's very strengthening. And given that there is a community and there are ways to resist, as small as they are, it's our obligation, political, moral, human. It's unconscionable to be aware of the scale of atrocities that are happening and not act in accordance. And we should act in accordance.
What is your message for Palestinians who otherwise have, a fairly and understandably negative view of the average Israeli? What is your message for those watching at home, thinking about when their next meal is going to be? I can't imagine anyone's going to see this in Gaza because of the horrible blockade imposed by Israel. But on the off chance that someone does, or someone sees it in the West Bank, what is your message to them?
I suppose just that I admire them for holding on, and that I'm trying to do what I can. And there are not enough, but a lot of people who are trying to do what they can. And I hope, if not materially, then at least in spirit, that is somewhat uplifting.
All right. Well, Yona, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything that you'd like to plug? Can we stay updated with your time in prison as you refuse IDF service? Can we keep in touch with you in any capacity?
Yeah, so there's my Twitter, which is the main social media I'm active in. And there's also the Mesavot network, which is the network of conscription refusers that I'm a part of. Just this morning, there were two of my friends, two members of the network, who were imprisoned for the refusal for the first time. One of them was sentenced for 20 days, and the other was sentenced to 30, and they'll probably be in prison again. And in 17 days, when I'm sentenced, I'll probably meet them in prison. And there we post updates from refusers and other political statements and content. And there's also there's links to donate to us, so the network keeps supporting the refusers, and also you can send letters and spread our message and interview other refusers. So that's a good place to be updated on the sort of activism that I've been doing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Yona. Everyone go check her out on Twitter. Check out all of the orgs down in the description below. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And more importantly, thank you for standing as a shining example of what an anti-Zionist Israeli can be in the world. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.